Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are discussing both Skeleton Crew and Creature Commandos, two shows that dropped this week. And I have some opinions. Now, one thing I will say is that both these shows have generally got a good response, and that's really good. You know, it's really good to see another Star Wars show get a good response out of the gate, primarily because, you know, Star Wars can be such a mixed bag sometimes. So to see something that kind of really has captured the Star Wars fandom is good. And, you know, I think it's the highest since Andor, now, so that's really good. You know, it's nice to see them picking up pace with some projects that are actually worthwhile, and for the majority of people, of course. And obviously, the same with Creature Commandos. It's the beginning of the DCU. It's nice to see that DC is getting back on its feet in some way. You know, this is the beginning of a new universe for them, so it's really important that they do it right. And it seems that for the vast majority of people, James Gunn has done that now. You can kind of guess from what I've just said there that I'm talking about the vast majority of people. I'm not talking about myself. I didn't dislike these shows. I just didn't love them. And it's only the first two episodes of each, so take that with a grain of salt as well, of course. It could totally change by, you know, episode 3, 4, 5, even 6, or so on. But I do feel like I mean, to be honest, I wasn't super excited for Skeleton Crew. Maybe a little bit more for Creature Commandos to see what was going on there for the DCU going forward. But yeah, not my favorite shows. There's some reasons. So with Skeleton Crew, I think what I found to be it took too long to get into it, and because you're dealing with children, you haven't got many complex kind of story beats to begin with, and it's all just children doing children things. And like, I feel like there's too much emphasis on like the test that they had to take and like the school side of things. Like, I get you've got to build it up. I get it's kind of like you know, everyone keeps mentioning the Goonies. It's kind of Stranger Things. I get that. I get the vibe they're going for. For me, it wasn't hitting. It wasn't giving what I needed. I kind of felt like the first episode really did feel like I was watching the beginning of Stranger Things again, for me personally, because it felt you're in suburbia as well. Like the planet felt far too like Earth for me as well. The outfits, you know, the only thing that was really alien on that planet and reminded you of Star Wars was the fact that you had some aliens and like references to Jedi. For me personally, it wasn't enough to kind of get me going, get me back in the Star Wars mood. The second episode did a lot better with that, of course, once you get onto the ship, once you get that kind of, you've really got that old Star Wars feel with this. Like, you kind of get transported really back to like that early kind of, the novels and like the kind of when they find the ancient ship, you kind of it reminds me a lot of like the older comics for Star Wars. I don't know why specifically. I can't give you like a specific example, but like I know that like what it reminds me of is when like Luke and Leia are searching for planets to find a new rebel base on for Hoth. Maybe that's what I'm kind of thinking of. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that, like these kind of like singular kind of missions that kind of play out in kind of, I keep saying kind of, a comic book-esque style that's a little bit more of the old style. So yeah, I did like that for sure. And I think the premise of Skeleton Crew is interesting as well. Apart from, for me, I feel like I've already visited that side of Star Wars with the Adventures in Wild Space book, which were aimed at children, but I did read them because it was kind of one of the few pieces of Star Wars media at the time that I was kind of really into. I keep saying kind of, it's kind of starting to annoy me now. And those books are really well written. I'm not really well spoken. And they really get to grips with the characters of the Graf family. And it felt like we've already kind of done this. It felt like, you know, we've got the children who get onto a ship and travel away, get away because their parents have been captured. And obviously that's slightly different to the show. And then they find a droid, they're like an old droid in a ship that helps them on their mission, and they've got people after them, and it just feels sort of like it's going to end up very similar to something I've seen before. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. And especially, you've got to remember that this show is not just aimed at hardcore Star Wars fans. This is arguably more aimed at like the general populace than Andor and Ahsoka, because this is like a new start, right? This is like, if you haven't watched even if you haven't watched The Mandalorian like so far in this show, like obviously later in the show you could get some references, etc. But right now, the first two episodes, they are like, it feels like a fresh start for Star Wars in a way. You could go in with this, you could watch this for the first time and then build your Star Wars repertoire from there. So I understand that this isn't just for me, but for me, it didn't really excite because I've seen this prior. I know where this kind of goes. I know the idea of the story. The one thing I will say was the interesting turnaround is I want to know what's happening with Atin, the planet, because they're making it out like the irony of this is that the children have come from the place that is the end goal, which I think is that's a really cool plot device. I do like that they've come from this planet that is essentially has essentially been hidden from the Republic, hidden from the Empire. It's giving Tanalia from Jedi Survivor, but they were on that planet. And like, what riches does it have? Or is it not that it has riches? Is it just that it went missing and people want to know what happened with it? It's also giving a bit of Camino. It's very Star Wars in its way, but they flipped it on the head, right? Because it's not someone searching for a planet that went missing. It's people coming from the planet that went missing into the world. It kind of also smacks of the Chiss in Outbound Flight, which is another Star Wars book. So in a way, I'm kind of almost, funnily enough, I'm kind of convincing myself through this that I maybe like it more than I first thought. But I don't get me wrong, I did enjoy it. I just don't think it's like, oh yeah, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Like, I'd rather watch Andor. I'd rather watch, personally, Ahsoka, and that's with the flaws that Dave Filoni has as a writer. I'd rather watch a little bit with The Mandalorian, because I feel like those stories, for me, have a little bit more newness to them. For me personally, this feels like, some Star Wars kind of, there was an insider source that was saying that Star Wars is suffering because they're primarily focusing on, or they think that they primarily have to focus on nostalgia, right? And I think that's what this show is doing. And don't get me wrong, it's working for it, so great. But it does feel like it's very much hitting the nostalgia mark. And trying to bring in kids at the meantime by giving it a kids show. I do think that's a good point, though. I do think that Star Wars doesn't focus enough on the children of the universe, and I think for a franchise that is based on children, it would be better to have some of them involved sometimes. Obviously, it's a war, I get it, but like, I think you can have these stories that are a little bit more understated. I think that's what they try to do with the Jedi, the Young Jedi Adventures show and stuff like that. I think targeting younger, like having a Padawan series or having, like Skeleton Crew, it makes sense. I get it. It's a cool concept, bringing more kids into the Star Wars universe by having kids that they can watch in the show. It's a good idea. So in a lot of ways, I do like the concept of Skeleton Crew. I do like the idea of Skeleton Crew. I didn't love the execution. I want them to get into it a little bit more. It felt very slow getting over those first two episodes, but I think it's going to pick up from there on. I also think because you're using children, there's not much action in the show, which I usually don't love action anyway. I'm more of I like the cerebral kind, the conversations, the dialogue, the discussions, but I think this show has a lot less of that action vibe. And I think Star Wars, what do people talk about Star Wars? The lightsaber fights, the space battles. And I think there needs to be a little bit more of that going into the next few episodes to make it kind of get back on par with other Star Wars projects. Because I'm thinking straight away of that first few episodes of Andor where I thought it was a brilliant scene where you've got Luthen and Cassian trying to get out of the place. I forget its name off the top of my head. And you have that gorgeous scene where they're on the speeder bike heading out, and that looked great. Not saying that this show doesn't have great shots, but I do think there's some issues there for me personally. Creature Commandos. Now, funnily enough, I think this show is quite the opposite of what I've just said regarding children. This show is for adults. Case of like, well, young adults into adults, because it has unequivocably, why can't I say that? Basically, it has adult scenes. I'm not going to go into it too much because I don't really like discussing that sort of thing, but I think it was a bit much for me personally in something that is meant to be the start of the DCU. Now, I'm not a prude necessarily. I understand that sometimes artistic representation in that form is necessary, especially when you're trying to convey a certain side of a character or a certain storyline. You know, there's certain things. For example, Oppenheimer did have some adult scenes, and I think it was necessary because you were trying to get inside the head of Oppenheimer, right? You're trying to understand what's going on with him. He has this wife, he has this mistress. What's going on there, right? Totally understandable. There are other shows that do it a similar way. But with this show, personally, I felt like it was a little bit too they wanted to go there. They were desperate to go there. Like, it felt like it went like James Gunn, and I don't know if he's kind of into this thing in his other projects, but from the Disney side of things, I didn't quite get this vibe from him, I guess. But to be fair, I haven't watched Peacemaker, so I think there's some in that as well, adult scenes. But I didn't quite expect it. And it kind of went off to the side and like, wow, okay, right, we're going straight into... Like, within the first episode was okay, but the second episode, within that episode, you have two couples, you know. And it felt... I understand why it was there in the story, and it was sort of, like I kind of said about Oppenheimer, it was similar, right? Not so much the first one, the second one with The Bride, I do think that was necessary to kind of set Frankenstein up as kind of being... you know, vengeful, right? That makes sense. The other one, unless it comes up later on and it makes sense, it felt kind of just for the sake of, to me personally. Now, the reason I think it's an issue for the DCU, and there's other things that surround this as well. The reason I think it's a problem for the DCU is that this is the flagpole first project that is going to bring the DCU forward. Now, of course, it does have references to the Suicide Squad, and it does obviously thus link to Peacemaker, which I've not watched either of those. I should, but it's one of those times where I'm watching a million different things. I'm trying to watch Indiana Jones like for the first time as well to get ready for the game that's coming out next week. Not happening either. It does have references to old stuff, but this is meant to be the tentpole flagpole thing, and it feels like this should have been something that came later, as something that was off to the side, as like maybe not the thing to introduce your DCU to the public. Because to me, right, and this is not me saying that maybe DC is not going in this direction, but to me, you're alienating a lot of viewers by going straight in for sort of a more adult vibe, right? What about kids? Yes, DC is arguably a little bit more mature as regards its themes than Marvel, but if you're trying to go up against Marvel, which is, I'm sorry, the biggest competitor of DC, I'd try and hit that audience too, the kid audience. And don't get me wrong, Marvel has its adult jokes and stuff like that, and especially like something with Deadpool that they just did, but they've earned that over like a lot of years, and then you've got one movie that like a kid can't watch, rather than like... And also, a lot of those people who watched Iron Man in 2008, let's say they were 8 at the time, they will now be at the time of Deadpool releasing, which was it this year? Was it this year? Either way, by the time of that releasing, you're talking, 16 years. So, like, that 8-year-old is now, I'm working out quick maths, 24? No. What? Yeah, I'm right. My maths, it was there, and I didn't trust myself. It's now 24. So in a way, you kind of like your franchise has grown with you, right? Now, again, maybe they're not trying to do that. Maybe James Gunn wants to appeal to a different audience, and that's fine. Maybe he's appealing to the audience that was the Marvel fans and is now 24. He could be. But I think, you know, a lot of the things that you do with a franchise, that like you cast, generally franchises or like universes, you cast younger because you know that they're going to age out. I think the same should be true of the cast, the target audience. For the majority, obviously, people are always going to watch these movies. As I just talked about Star Wars, there's a nostalgia element. There's also kid element, right? So that. Also, I just feel like how many times can we do the Task Force X? I know this is Task Force M, but how many times can we do that concept? And how many times can we do the kind of ragtag group concept? Because I feel like the show is very full of gunnisms, as I'll call them. And again, not always bad. Some of it was funny. And I think, by the way, that the show looks really well drawn. It looks great. And again, you know, nice to see other characters get the spotlight for a change. New, different characters, interesting to learn about some new lore about the universe. I've never really learned about Creature Commandos before, and it's nice to see that kind of being explored on the screen. But, you know, Suicide Squad 2, however you want to call it, Peacemaker, then this. That's kind of all that's been done. And all that kind of is relevant now to the DCU, right? And that, to me, just feels meh. And I understand they're kind of going into it now. They're going into like Cersei, and like she's the main bad, and like they have done the Alien with Starro, and like, you know, Superman is coming. It just feels kind of like monotonous so far. And again, I've not even watched those movies, but I kind of understand, in my head at least, what they would be like. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should watch them, and maybe I shouldn't make an assumption. But to me, it all feels sort of in the same vein. And I'm really kind of interested to see how Superman drops, because what kind of vibe is Superman going to be? Is it going to be like, can James Gunn do something different? Because it feels like his Guardians movie, you know, movies aren't dissimilar from his other stuff. As regards like the superhero genre, he's kind of very samey, except for this has a bit more adult violence. And let's not just say. Let me put it this way, right? James Gunn is to the superhero community what Dave Filoni is to Star Wars. They're good. They're not bad. I'm not saying that. But they are very one-trick pony. They can do their thing and they do it really well. But then you want something else, right? And sometimes you think maybe it'd be better if someone else was also kind of half pulling the reins to try and guide it in a different direction. That's my take. I'm not saying it's the take. I'm not saying these shows are bad. I don't think they're bad. Just let me clarify that. And I can see why other people would really enjoy them. And just there's a bit of a same stuff, different day for me, and I'm hoping that we can kind of overcome that with the next episodes to come. So with that said, let me know what you guys thought of Creature Commandos. I'm getting comfortable in my chair in case you're wondering why I'm going to the screen like this. For those watching or listening, should I say, you don't know what's happening, but if you watch on YouTube, you'll see. Thank you guys, as always, for watching and listening. If you have enjoyed Creature Commandos and Skeleton Crew, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the shows. In the meantime, I will see you guys again very soon for more. We've got a lot of movies coming up. We've got Mufasa the Lion King, Sonic 3. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim because I don't think it's showing near me, but we'll try. And then we also have, there's one more, Craven. We have Craven as well. And then we also have What If at the end of the year. So we have a lot still to come. We're going to round up the year very strong. Looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. Thank you guys. I'll see you later.